Hello all and welcome to the second Mayborn Mentor event of the spring semester. We're very excited to have you. This is a great opportunity that our board really put together as part of their education committee to connect our students directly to our excellent alumni and professionals in the field. So we're really lucky to have 3 alumni today who are on with us. And I'll let them do their own introduction, but did want to say thank you guys all for attending, and big thank you to our panelists for being such great sports, for being here and connecting with you guys. So I'm just going to pass it off to each of them to introduce themselves, and we'll go from there. I will be monitoring the chat as well, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or at the end of the, towards the end of the presentation, we will do an open opportunity for you to ask yourself. So feel free to join that way. But I will start by introducing Scott White. And Scott, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Great, thanks. I am Scott White. I am the owner and CEO of BizCom Associates, which includes BizCom PR, it's an agency, Digital BizCom, BizCom Design, and BizCom Press, which is a publishing company. I graduated from North Texas in 1977, where I was editor of the Daily there. Spent about 10 to 12 years as a sports writer and then writing for magazines, producing TV shows, and working in the book publishing division before I started my first PR agency and have now had a PR agency for about 30 years and have had many employees, many interns from North Texas over the year and have been heavily involved in PR. I was president of the Texas Public Relations Association, which has now been merged into PRSA. So that's the quick summary of who I am.
Thank you, Scott. Patty, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Patty Ariano Talata, and I am currently the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for Dallas College, which was formerly the Dallas County Community College District, so 7 campuses across Dallas County. And I was actually a student of Dallas College before I transferred over to UNT. And I graduated from UNT with a degree in journalism with an emphasis in advertising and a minor in marketing in 1991. And why I say that is because I actually ended up my first job out of school, and I think we may talk about that later, but I ended up doing PR. And because the program at the Mayborn was so comprehensive, I had taken a PR class, and when I graduated, I had to kind of shift gears and go into PR instead of advertising. And that ended up kind of laying the foundation for my entire career. So I'd done PR and communications and marketing in a variety of places, and the nonprofit sector, in financial, I did retail marketing, and I did high-tech marketing, working for Texas Instruments for 16 years before I came to Dallas College a couple of years ago. So I think the foundation that you're getting at the Mayborn School is really, I think it's so good because you can then kind of go any direction you want because you're getting a really good basic set of skills.
Thank you, Veronica. Or thank you, Patty. Veronica, would you like to go next?
Thank you. Yes, appreciate it. And Veronica Sofer graduated from the University of North Texas in 1993 with a degree in journalism, emphasis in public relations. I'm currently the Chief Communications Officer for Fort Bend ISD in the Houston area. I've been in school PR for almost 20 years. Before that, I was the Chief Communications Officer for Leander ISD in the Austin area, and then Arlington ISD in DFW. So got into school PR fairly early in my career after a little stint in finance and in hospitality, public relations, and have been here ever since. And so I'm currently the sitting president for the Texas Schools Public Relations Association, a sister organization to PRSA. And I have to say that working in the newspaper and in the lab and for the Daily and the internships I had an opportunity to do at the Mayborn really set me up and were instrumental in my resume being looked at early on. So I encourage folks to use those internship opportunities as leverage when you are going out into the workforce. So I'm excited about today's conversation. Thank you.
Veronica, you actually really teed up our first question really great. And so I'm just going to ask all three of you the same question. What was your first job after graduation and what did it teach you? So Veronica, you can go first.
Thank you. I got hired on at Las Colinas Country Club about 3 weeks before graduation from North Texas. And I was responsible for internal communications. And really, the focus was internal messaging and stakeholder morale and creating buy-in. So I spent the next 6 to 9 months working on that. And I would say the thing that it taught me was never be afraid to ask questions. Never be afraid to question someone's strategy because they may be coming at it from a way that they've always done things. And we were learning new innovative ways. We were learning ways to leverage the internet and to leverage other marketing opportunities. And that wasn't something the country club was used to. So when I came in, I think I brought a little bit of spice and technology into the world. Of course, mind you, this was also the time of dial-up. So you put it all in perspective. But I would say the thing I learned most about that first position is that questioning and wondering are keys to making you successful.
That's wonderful, Veronica. Patty, how about you? What was your first job after graduation? You again kind of hit on this. And what did it teach you?
So I forgot one part of it, and some of you might experience this. So when I first graduated college, it was December of 1991, and we were in a recession. So the country was having a really hard time. There were not a lot of jobs to be had. So I ended up doing kind of odd jobs for 9 months, and just, and I paid for my own school. I was paying for my own everything. And so I was just hustling. I was doing temp jobs. I worked in offices. I worked as a receptionist for one place. And then I finally in September of 92, I finally got a job working for a chamber of commerce and as their PR manager. And I told you all that before because, some of you might be facing, having to hustle a little bit, and there's no shame in that. You do what you got to do, and you keep looking for a job. And that's what I did. I never gave up. And I could have just kept being a receptionist because I was making okay money, but I really wanted to get into my field. So just, keep your eye on that prize and keep working to get what you want, to get the job you want that's going to help you build your resume. So eventually I ended up in working in the Chamber of Commerce, and it was a small department, a department of 2 people, and we had to do everything. I did everything from writing news releases. I wrote the membership newsletter and designed it. This was back in the day, and I was designing it on PageMaker, I think was the program. So I don't even think that exists anymore. But I had to design it, I had to write it, and I did volunteer committees, like I chaired them and set them up. I did event planning. I did everything. And that was the coolest experience. I did that for 4 years because I learned so much just getting my hands dirty, and I didn't know how to do half of it. And as I mentioned before, my degree was in advertising, but I ended up being, they had me focusing on PR from the jump. And so I ended up pulling out my old PR book from the class I took at Mayborn. And it was like, okay, refreshing my memory on how to write a news release and how to approach PR in general. And so I really give so much credit to my education there because it was broad and because they did, and I didn't get a choice. I had to take PR. There was no choice given to me. And I'm so grateful for that because I could pivot and handle anything. And so I think when you go work for a smaller organization versus a larger one, which I ended up in later, you really do have to do all kinds of things, and it exposes you to all the different types of methods of communicating, whether it's through more towards the marketing or more the communications and PR side. And all of that experience is good, especially early on. So I'd say don't, have your goals in mind, but also be open to things that you may not have considered, just so that you can maybe get different experiences.
Thank you, Patty. I loved the comment about wearing many hats. You definitely, especially getting out of college, have to wear many hats and lots of jobs. So knowing that we have all those background in our students and they've all learned all these great skills is helpful as they go out into careers in the field today. Scott, how about you? What was your first job after graduation and what did it teach you?
Well, my first job after graduation in '77 was as a sports writer for the Clean Daily Herald. And at the time, having been editor of the Daily, I thought I knew the importance of deadlines, but it taught me the seriousness of deadlines, and that they there is nothing more important than a deadline. I also learned how to deal with a variety of personalities, of people who are grumpy, who are nice, who were liars, who were honest, and also learned how to handle criticism. It was back then, you didn't get attacked on Twitter and Facebook. You got attacked through letters to the editor, but it was still just as vicious. And so I learned probably those three things: the importance of deadlines, dealing with different personalities, and how to handle criticism.
Thank you, Scott. That was very helpful. Scott, I'm just going to start with you on the second question here. What was the one thing you would tell your 21-year-old self about your career ahead?
It's basically what I told myself then, and that's you have to take control of your career yourself. You can't depend on other people to find you jobs or give you jobs. I had the first 6 years I was out of school, I had 5 different jobs, basically because I knew where I wanted to go. And so I was willing to, I think people would call it job hopping, but if there was a good opportunity, I would pursue it and take it. It didn't make my previous employers that happy, but it got me to where I wanted to go. And so, really it was just about, I would be telling myself, look for opportunities and go after them, even if it's at your own expense. We didn't have big budgets at that first newspaper I worked at, but if there was something going on in Dallas or Houston or Austin that I wanted to go be a part of and cover, or maybe meet the people who were there covering it, I would do it at my own expense, on my own time, even if I had to take vacation, just to make the connections, just to cover that type of event, get that exposure. And so basically that would be it. Take control of your career yourself, or you're going to be miserable. You're going to be hoping for other people to take care of you.
Thank you, Scott. They say millennials and Gen Z are excellent at job hopping. So you were the original millennial, I think.
Mm-hmm. We all did.
Veronica, let's go with you next. Same question. What is the one thing you would tell your 21-year-old self about your career ahead?
So I was thinking about that as you first posed the question, and a long list came to me. But I think the thing that I'll share, which is probably more relatable to everyone else, is to not be afraid to take chances. We get taught that there's a path, that there's a strategy, that there is a formula that will get you to success, and will get you to where you want to be financially with the right title. But no one really explained to me the path to happiness and to fulfillment in terms of what I was doing with my professional career. The things that I brought home at the end of the night, and just was super proud that I got to participate in a particular project, an initiative, something that was helping other people in the community. It took me some time to figure that part out. So I think what I would tell my 21-year-old self is to not be afraid to take chances on a path that isn't a traditional one, or one that's going to get you to where you think you need to be as quickly as you think you need to get there. Because also time is relevant. I had a mindset of what I needed to be doing at 25, what I needed to be doing at 30, what I needed to be doing at 35, how many children I had to have. And in reality, time is it's just another variable, but your ability to passionately work and do what it is that fulfills you on a professional level is more important, and time doesn't always match with that. So that's what I would tell my 21-year-old self.
That is such great advice. Having a fulfilling career, I think, is so important. And those paths aren't always linear, and they're not always on your timeline, but being fulfilled with the work that you do, I think, is really important. So thank you for that, Veronica. Patty, you're my last one for this question. What is the one thing you would tell your 21-year-old self about your career ahead?
Well, mine is kind of almost the opposite of Veronica's, in that or not my advice, because I love her advice, but my path, because I I was first generation college. My mom didn't even graduate high school, and I was the first one in the family to graduate college. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I didn't understand. I did get some internships, but I didn't understand how to really think about it as far as a career. I just thought about paying the bills, even when I graduated, because I was just so used to that kind of life. And so I didn't aspire. I didn't have a 25-year-old plan or a 30-year-old plan or with the kids and all that. Like, I just didn't think in those terms because I didn't know that I should be thinking like that. So it was really, I was used to paycheck. So I think what I would say is to don't be afraid to aspire to something bigger, to set those goals high, and to say, I can do it. Because I think that sometimes we are so limited in our thinking that we don't think big enough. And I think that's what I did. Now I've got a big title now and a big job, which still shocks me sometimes because it was totally meandering around and grace of God kind of stuff that I got here. I worked really hard, but it wasn't something I ever really said, I want to go do that. I was blessed and I worked hard and I got here. But I think that for some folks, maybe I could have gotten here sooner, or, it could have happened differently and maybe a little bit easier if I had planned. So I guess I always want to tell young people, like, think about it long term, think about what you want to do ultimately. And then it doesn't have to be linear. I totally agree with that. I have made lateral moves just to get a different experience. And then and I can clearly see how that lateral move helped me get to this role. So lateral doesn't always mean that you're not still trying to get to where you want to go. It just means you're getting different experiences. So I totally agree with that. But I think I was young and I was kind of afraid of maybe getting disappointed, or I was also afraid of being heard and seen, because I was just like, let me just get the work done. And I think that I look back and I think, gosh, what else could I have achieved, or what other experiences could I have had if I had not limited my thinking. So that's what I would tell myself.
That's also good advice. You guys are full of good advice. It's a good thing we have all three of you here today. Our third question, and Patty, I'll start with you, is going to be, if you were looking to hire your replacement, what keywords or themes or experiences would you be looking to see on their resume?
It's interesting because on the resume, I think resumes, you can put all your keywords in there. You've got different types of experience. You're a good writer, a good communicator. Those are really important. But I think the traits that I'd look for is resiliency. And I think people who will take initiative. And problem solving, I think those are really critical things, not just to work, but to life, because things aren't always going to go the way you planned. And you have to be resilient enough to take that and then see, what can I learn from it? And how do I keep moving forward and pushing through? And I think approaching obstacles as more of an opportunity that you can figure out how to solve the problem is another good trait I look for when I hire people. It's, can they solve problems versus, sometimes things happen and I tell my team, it's like, you have 30 minutes to complain or to gripe about it or to, take it to heart, but then you got to shake it off and you got to move on and get to problem solving mode and start figuring out, what are we going to do next? Because, life happens and nothing goes smoothly. I mean, it's just rare that something actually happens the way you plan it. You just have to be resilient and move on.
Thank you, Patty. And something I just realized as I was talking to all of you and asking this question, all three of you are in positions where you hire other people. So yes, you've seen these resumes. Yes, you know what you're looking for. So you guys are all a great resource for this question. Scott, I'll go to you. Again, if you were looking to hire your replacement, what keywords, themes, experiences would you be looking for on a resume?
Well, if I'm hiring my replacement, I'm hiring somebody to take over my agency. So I hope they have a lot of money and can cover payroll during those tough times. Now, really what I would look for, especially in type of position I'm in, is someone who has a really good imagination and vision, but more than anything, somebody that asks why all the time. Why are we doing things this way? Is there a better way to do something? But, and somebody who isn't afraid, if they think there's a better way to do it, to try it. And then if it doesn't, it's not always going to work, but they're not afraid to at least try. So really, yeah, I don't know that it relates to everyone here, but if you were replacing me, that's what you would need to be able to take my position, I guess. Somebody very entrepreneurial.
Thank you, Scott. And Veronica, same question. If you were looking to hire your replacement, what kind of keywords, themes, or experiences would you be wanting to see on their resume?
When I'm looking to hire folks, I not only look for those keywords, leadership, problem solving, all of those kinds of things. I also look for, in a way, innovative ways that they have been able to incorporate other words that give me a little insight, like adventurous or something outside the box that really just speaks to how they are trying to craft the message in a way that helps them stand out a little bit. So what I like to see a lot of creativity. The resumes that we see now are very visual. There's a lot of infographics, a lot of icons. You no longer see those black and white on linen paper type resumes. That's just not how we communicate those kinds of skills anymore. So I like to be able to easily see someone's experience, but I like to read and see their creativity between the lines. So I always flag those that have a good way of bringing personality into their resume, because I feel like, number one, you shouldn't hide who you are, and authenticity in the creative space is really important. Um, and so while I am looking for professionals who can write, who know AP style, who have demonstrated a strong work ethic and have good references, I want to also see the fun side of you. And that sometimes is an indicator as to how you work under stress. Is a little bit to what Patty talked about earlier, how they're going to handle those tough times. And my experience has been people that are comfortable sharing their personality are usually comfortable sharing those kinds of things as well early up front, and they end up being a good member of my team.
That's very helpful. Awesome. Veronica, I'll just go with you again for this last question, and then we're going to open up the floor to student questions. And students, you can write them in the chat if you'd like me to ask them, or you're more than welcome to take yourself off mute, put on your camera, say hello, and ask questions yourself. Either one is an option for you. So last question, Veronica, what is the best piece of professional advice you have ever gotten?
On time is late. On time is late is the best piece of professional advice I have ever gotten. It has served me very well. And I have passed that along to my mentees. And really, no bad can come of it, quite honestly. You get exposed to opportunities sooner. You are always top of mind when you do that. And people just listen you differently when you are there ahead of schedule. And not too much, but be mindful that there are boundaries. Be mindful, especially in this virtual age when we're hopping on Zooms, that being a couple minutes early is means you're ready to go as soon as the meeting starts, right on the 30 or right on the 45 or whatever time the meeting time is scheduled. You're in your seat ready to go. You're not looking for a pen, or you're not wrapping up the last meeting. So I know it's not always possible, but when it is, I think it demonstrates a strong work ethic.
Thanks, Veronica. Scott, we'll go to you next. What is the best piece of professional advice you've ever received?
It was from a mentor years and years ago, and it's a little hard to understand sometimes, but basically he was always saying that different is not always better, but better is always different. And what he was saying then is that you can't be better than other people. You can't have a better product or a better business or a better story if it's the same. And if you're back then as a sports writer, there might be 10 people interviewing a person. And if 9 of them go away and write the same story, he would always say, a lot of people are going to leave with the same story. You have to leave with a different story if it's going to be better. And it may not always be better, but it's never going to be better if it's not different than what everyone else is doing. And ironically, one of my people that I admire the most was Steve Jobs, and that was the campaign that he always came up with, was think different. So I guess that would be the best advice I ever got.
I think you're on
Sorry,
mute.
I had myself on mute because I'm awesome. Patty, you're the last one on this one. What is the best piece of professional advice you've ever received?
So I got it a little later in my career. So I was already probably like 10 years into my career, and no one had ever told me this. And I had someone who turned out to be my mentor, but she at the time was my vice president. And she took me into a room and basically said, it was a performance discussion. And she told me that I was not taking a seat at the table, like literally and figuratively. So when I was in meetings working with our internal clients, I wasn't making my voice heard in the room. And she said, I suspect that you are getting things done and you're getting buy-in and consensus outside of the room, and you're doing it offline. And because they're all happy and they're happy with the work product, but she was a female, and she's like, as a female, you need to be sitting at the table, not in the back of the room or around the perimeter of the room. You need to be sitting at the table, and you need to make your recommendations in the room. And you need to feel confident enough and strong enough in those recommendations to do it then. And initially, because I'm Gen X and, we're not as good as millennials at taking feedback, I was like really totally disagreeing with her in my head and not really hearing her. But after I took some time to process it, I realized she was right. And I took it to heart. And within a year, I was in a leadership role. She put me in a leadership role because I did it. I started doing it and I started getting more comfortable. And it wasn't comfortable for me because I was used to kind of being a little more shy and quiet in the room and getting work done outside of that environment. And I really had to push myself to take a leadership role. And her advice to me was, take that seat at the table, and that you can be a leader in any role. So you don't have to be managing people to act like a leader. And that is something I pass along to my team and to mentees now, because I really believe that. And I had to live through it myself. I wished that somebody had given it to me earlier, given me that feedback earlier, but I'm glad I got it when I did.
Absolutely. It kind of sounds like all of you are speaking the same language when you say you have to be your own best advocate. You can't allow someone else to see your leadership qualities if you're not willing to tout them yourself, if you're not willing to be your own lead in this situation. So thank you all. That is the end of my questions. I would love to open up the floor to student questions, feedback, anything like that. This is now an opportunity to do it. Students, you can just take yourself off of mute, say hello, and ask questions.
Hi, I have a question for Veronica and Patty. Patty, just from what you just said, I wanted to ask you if it's ever too soon to start showing your leadership qualities. Like right out of college, when I get my first job, I don't want to walk in there and be like, yeah, like let's get it done. I want to be at the center of the table, like putting in my input. Is it ever too soon? Do you think people will think I'm stepping over my power? Like, how do you go about that, just being such a young adult going into a professional scene?
I don't think it's too soon. I think it's the way you do it. So it's all about the how and listening first, making sure that you're really listening, and not in listening in that way where you're already thinking about what you're going to say, but really listening and then saying, okay, does this still make sense now that I've heard that? Because you might go into a meeting and have an idea already formulated, but once you listen and you really hear what's going on, it's okay to ask questions, get additional feedback, that will help you kind of flesh out your idea. And if it still seems valid, then I think it's fine to speak up and say it. But I would say, don't try to be the first one to talk. Like really try to listen first and let the people with more experience kind of chime in. But it's definitely okay to ask questions along the way. And I think that demonstrates that you're engaged and that you are paying attention and that you're trying to learn from the experienced people around you. But I'll be the first to admit, you don't know it all. Just because you're in a leadership role doesn't mean you know everything. And people who come in with fresh voices and fresh outlooks, especially in the communications world where social media, where there's so much happening that I'm not aware of because I'm not the target audience anymore. Like I work for a college, I'm not the target audience. So having somebody come in who's fresh out of college is actually good because they've got a closer perspective to what my target audience is looking for. So I think that also comes into play. So Veronica, would you add anything there?
I would just add that I've seen that happen and it not go very well. So, to Patty's point, the how is critical. And I would just say to be mindful that different generations struggle to communicate effectively, and there's oftentimes a misunderstanding of intention. And so it's imperative that when you do find yourself ready to speak up and contribute, that yes, you've done your listening, you have asked questions, you have demonstrated your commitment to learning and growing, and bring in your um, bring in your ideas with an understanding that people might have a difficult time listening it until they're comfortable with you. And I've seen this happen, especially in the last couple of years, as we have hired younger and younger people onto our teams. Some of the older folks who are been in the profession 30 or 40 years are not used to that type of response. You know, they haven't raised teenagers in 25 years. Those of us who are raising teenagers are more familiar with the way of communicating and the directness and the self advocacy that comes with being in that generation. And it's not malicious on either part. It is a disconnect in the way we communicate our values. So I would just keep that in mind. Don't be offended if someone's offended at your approach. It just means they don't know how to receive it, and it's something that we're all working on. You know, I will tell you, our human resources department actually does trainings for us, for senior leaders, on how to communicate and engage with younger staff because of the generational gaps and because of the differences in which we communicate our values and communicate our wants and needs.
Karina, can I add something real
Absolutely.
quick? Crystal, I'm going to probably give a different answer than the other two just because in the agency business, it's a little different. But we hire a lot of recent grads, people with 3 to 5 years experience. And the first thing we look for is people who are going to step out with ideas and take leadership position. I mean, that's what people who are willing to throw ideas out there and who are willing to, that we know that we can turn loose with a client if we need to, and have confidence and are self-assured enough that even if it's a terrible idea, they're still confident in putting it out there and not afraid to put it out there. Now, again, it's a little different in the agency side where we're selling ideas and creativity. So that's what we're looking for.
Thank you. And then for Veronica, I had a question earlier. You were talking about resumes and you like to see creativity within when you're reading resumes and letting that personality shine through it. So, as a first year college student, I've been doing a lot of scholarships, and scholarships are kind of like the same as resumes. And I've been speaking to like a lot of different professors. And for my first scholarship, it was very like cookie cutter, like, this is my leadership, this is what I've done, these are the organizations. For those types of things, should I get like whenever I do submit my resume for jobs, I do want to show my personality, but even leading up to that, like through scholarships, should I show my personality? Like, should I be shining through my creativity? Like those little words. I think Patty mentioned like throwing in little words, like being active and just really shining through. Like, should I do that with scholarships as well?
I absolutely would. The idea, whether you're in the marketing, advertising, um, PR field sequence, at the end of the day, your visibility strategy needs to align to your personal brand. And your personal brand is most often identified in your resume, regardless if it's for a position or application for college or scholarship. So it needs to be reflective of who you are. Be mindful of who your target audience is. So don't go too far on the to the extreme. But I like personally the subtlety of creativity being woven into something that is more formal, more traditional. I like seeing words, a play on words. That's creative to me. Um, I've even giggled when I've read a pun, and most people would read right over it. But this person was creative enough to use the word in a way that seemed to me very methodical. And I like to see the brain at work. So that's my personal opinion.
I think
Thank you.
the only thing I would add is that just make sure that you don't focus on the creativity so much that you lose the content. So the content, especially with scholarships, because you're being compared directly against somebody else for money. So you're going to make sure that the story you're telling is compelling, because that's ultimately what scholarships are about. It's about telling your story, and the creativity is part of that. But just make sure that the story is still fully baked on top of that.
Okay. Thank you guys.
Great
I have a
question.
question.
Go ahead.
So I am majoring in journalism. Obviously, my concentration is advertising. I have 2 more years left, but before I transfer to UNT, I actually got my real estate license. And so a problem that I'm having is people not taking me serious, because I guess one, I'm young, and then I'm 4'11", so I'm this short girl. People, how do I get people to take me serious, when I finish my degree and go into, advertising or PR or wherever it leads me to, you know?
So I had a similar thing when I graduated. When well into my 30s, I was at TI, and they would ask me if I was an intern. And so that was, now, I look back and I'm like, man, what a great problem to have, but because I'm much older now. But at the time it was like, come on, and I don't know if the other two panelists will have a silver bullet on this one. The only thing I can say is I had to earn credibility. It was just straight up, just day by day, just putting in the time, showing them how I think, showing them that I was good at my job. And ultimately, that's how I would prove it out. And at times, I did have to stand up for myself. So when I'd have people, it was a company full of engineers, mostly male, a lot of people from all over the world with different cultural kind of vibes. And so they were tough. And they would often try to bully me a little bit, and push me, and to see if I would stand up for myself. And it would just seem to be kind of a cultural thing. And I did. And once I would kind of stand my ground, make a recommendation in a way that was based on data or research or sound thinking, and I had my rationale, I would do my homework. And once I showed them I've done all this work, and then I kind of stood by my recommendation, then I started earning their respect.
And I would add that just look for as many opportunities as you can to prove that you can do it, whether it's an internship or a class project or a freelance opportunity or contract. But over time, when we get resumes at the agency, the first thing we look for is experience. It's not height, and we get people with all sorts of backgrounds, a lot of times not even in advertising or PR. But I think the thing that we look for more than anything is just, what is your experience and what have you done? So I would say in your case, in a year or two, you'll have plenty of experience if you go after internships and projects.
Yeah. Okay.
And if I could add to, fast forward 20 plus years, and I still haven't grown any inches. I'm still barely 5 foot. So I don't know if I'm 4'11", but, barely, getting close, right in there. You have to learn to embrace everything about you, your voice, the way you sound when you're in a boardroom, and it's echoing off, how you present, how you, your stature, be comfortable enough in your own skin so that when you are proving yourself and you are being, find yourself in a position like Patty was, you're confident enough to not let those things block you from making your point and from demonstrating your skill and your talent. It's easy to say, And I don't know that I was certainly there at your age, but it took me a little bit of time to really be comfortable in my skin. But once I did, people stopped, or at least my perception was that people stopped looking at me in a particular way or looking down at me, because, I did have to wear 2-inch heels to every single meeting to try to meet people close to eye level. And I was still off 4 or 5 inches, but it is really your perception of how you are. So that's what I would say, is work on that part first.
Awesome.
Confidence matters. Confidence really matters. And the way I looked at it is how commanding the room. So when you speak, and you don't have to speak all the time, right? But when you do speak, are you saying it with the right tone of voice and the right posture? Because I'm not that tall either. And having all of that, it matters when you walk in the room, how you carry yourself and how you carry your voice. It really does matter. And so you have to be thinking in those terms. It's like, okay, if I'm going to speak, I have to command the room so that when I do speak, they listen.
Okay. And then second, for the resumes, do you recommend everything being on one paper? Because I have a problem squishing everything into one paper. Or can it be 2 pages? I get different answers from people.
It doesn't matter to us as long as your experience is on there. The cover letter, and it's maybe different for other people. We rarely look at cover letters. First thing we look at, especially for entry-level type positions, is internships, and then for 3 to 5 year experience where they worked before. I mean, and if it takes 2 pages to put that, that's fine. 1 page, it honestly doesn't matter, especially on a screen. It's just scrolling now.
That's how I feel too. I would agree. I don't look at cover letters. So I feel sorry for people who spend a lot of time on them because I never look at them. But the 1 or 2 pages doesn't matter as long as, again, back to content, as long as the content is good.
Okay.
Well, and I'll give you a little differing opinion. Yes, 2 pages for me, but I do look at cover letters. I don't look at it necessarily for content, but I look at it for grammar and AP style. I can tell you real quick, if you got an Oxford comma, you don't belong in my shop. If you're using over instead of moran, I know we can get into this debate all day long. There's a place for you, just not in my shop. And so there are just, I use that as a tool to further evaluate how it is you communicate, because I can tell you right off the bat what I think is a good fit and what isn't. But 2 pages is fine for me.
Okay.
Actually, Veronica raised a good point because I have used cover letters to weed people out. So I don't need them, but when somebody does send it, I look at it and it does make a difference. So if you're gonna do one, make sure it's really good.
Thank you.
Good luck.
All right, students, we still have 15 minutes. If you have any other great questions you want to ask, again, you can put them in the chat or just go off mute and ask away. While we're
We're
waiting,
looking for summer interns. I'll throw that out.
while we're waiting for people to hop back in and ask questions if they want to, I just kind of want to throw out to you guys. I like that you talked about finding your own voice and being respected in the position you're in. How long do you feel like it takes in your own industries, higher education, PR, to really be respected in those by just doing your job at the rate you should be doing it? I know in my world, it takes about 1.5 years for people to really feel comfortable with people in advancement. So want to throw it out to you guys. How long do you feel like it takes to really get that respect in your fields?
In our field, I think it really comes down to performance. And I've had, when we opened our New York office years ago, I had a person with 2 years experience running it, 2 years out of school, but she was incredibly confident. She was incredibly talented. At the same time, we've had people 4, 5, 10 years who didn't really progress, but they were competent, but to me, in PR and the people I know, it comes down to their performance. And we know right away, like I said, in the meetings, we're looking for people right out of school. When they're right out of school in our meetings, we're looking for people who are confident and aren't afraid to speak up, aren't afraid to come out with ideas. And those are the people that eventually we know are going to really succeed.
I would say for me and for us, I think it depends on, like at Dallas College, it's a little more, I think, open to people of different experience levels. So, and I would say on my marketing team, we've got people from all age ranges here, and it really is performance based. So I would agree with Scott there. So someone new could come in and be, it probably takes about 6 months to show consistency of that. So if someone's a high performer, you want to see that consistent over time before you can really make a true judgment, because you have to be able to keep it up at that level. But it doesn't take that long, and it doesn't really matter on someone's age, I don't think, or experience. It really is about the level of effort they're putting in and the consistency over time.
And I would just add, I've seen folks come in and hit a home run right away. Part of what I deal with as a K-12 is crisis communication. We have shootings on campuses, we have suicides, we have scandal, we have theft, we have crime, all of those things happen. And so I've gone in and within the first 4 or 5 weeks had to do a press conference and do national media for 2 whole weeks after a story happened. So there have been times when I've been able to see people do just that, come in and immediately set the precedence for how they're going to perform, their level of expectation and professionalism, and just hit a home run right off the bat. And then I've seen others, 2 or 3 years in, finally get the opportunity to do something similar. So sometimes you're also subject to the circumstance. For those of us that serve as a media spokesperson and a PIO, public information officer, you're given more chances to shine because there are more crises inherent in your job. So that's something else. I mean, in a large organization where you might have a marketing team and then you have a PIO, the marketing team is doing good, consistent work that's effective, but the PIO may get a chance to shine brighter because they are handling media on a daily basis. And so it translates a little bit differently.
That's a good point.
Wonderful. Any other students who want to chime in our last about 10 minutes here? Ask questions. Scott's hiring students for internships. All right, then. I guess seeing none, we will end just a little bit early, give you guys back a couple minutes of your afternoon today. Again, thank you to all the students who attended. Thank you to our panel.
I think there's a question in chat now.
Yeah, oh look, yay, there's one. What are some signs of a toxic work environment? Patty, do you want to start with that one? Then we'll just pass it down the line before we close up.
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think and there's probably more formal definition somewhere, but I think having an environment that's not good is when people don't feel heard, they don't feel appreciated, or maybe they're being judged. They feel like they're being judged. I try to create an environment where people can have healthy disagreements, or at least be able to bring things to the table if they don't agree with something, even if they don't agree with me, but to do it constructively. So I think criticism and feedback can be taken as a really negative thing if it's done poorly, but if you're doing it well and you're doing it constructively, it really can help because you can learn from it. So I've been in environments where that part was toxic and you felt like you were constantly judged or nothing was ever good enough and not feeling appreciated. And that's not a great place to be, because it's hard to come to work every day when you feel like that's what you're walking into. So I think if you're working in that kind of environment, you can try to talk to your supervisor or even HR to help you guide you through those conversations and how to maybe help them. I don't know if Scott or Veronica have other.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too depends on the type of business or work. I know in the agency business, what can create a toxic environment is too much control, too many rules, not the freedom to come up with creative and be creative. And that may work better in some environments, but in the agency environment where, ideas are key, I've seen situations at other agencies where if it's too much control, if you have to be here at this certain time and follow these rules, and you can only do it this way, it can create an incredibly toxic environment. Whereas that might work well in other places.
And I would just add the element of camaraderie is you're in a toxic environment where you don't see any camaraderie whatsoever, no collaboration, people working in silos, lots of blame, a lot of blaming going on when something gets missed, everyone just protecting their own backs, their own divisions. That is definitely a sign of a toxic work environment, because you end up not being able to trust. And when you can't trust, when you think about the reptilian brain, we're either in fight or fight mode. When that part of the brain is activated, it takes away energy and power from our creativeness and from our problem solving part. And that's what generally most of us are doing in our roles. So that's something to look for. And then also to looking for signs where manipulation is being used to control people, control projects, control initiatives, control timelines. When people are being manipulated, they're not being trusted. And that's definitely a sign of toxic behavior. And I would try to avoid it as much as possible.
That's fantastic. Any other questions students want to put in the chat, or anything else you guys want to ask before we wrap up today? I'll give it just a couple seconds. All right then. Again, thank you guys all for coming and being part of this today. This has all been recorded and we will share on our social media. And so you can come back to this later, look at it again, or share with all your friends and tell them how much they need to attend the next ones we have coming up. These are once a week between now and the first week of April. So we hope you will join us again. All of our panels are as awesome as this one. So hope that you can be here with us. But thank you again to our panelists. Thank you again, students. Have a lovely afternoon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.